As Neville Goddard has famously said, all of life is the appeasement of hunger. All of life is but the appeasement of hunger. I've been thinking a lot about this quote, all of life is but the appeasement of hunger, and thinking about the ways in which this is true. Because really, the premise of the teachings of Neville Goddard really centers on the idea of how do we satisfy desire. And the premise here is that each and every human being has desires, and that really having desires is really a key part of the experience of being human. All of life is but the appeasement of hunger. So the idea being that we are hungry to experience certain things. And of course, what will satisfy that hunger can range, it can vary, it can be as individual as each of us are individual. But perhaps one of the shared features of being human is our desire. The fact that each one of us has desires, possesses desires, has the desire to appease some sort of hunger. Now, we are taught in other ancient traditions that desire, specifically unfulfilled desire, can be a source of suffering. Because in theory, if you are hungry for something and unable to satiate that hunger, then that would cause a sensation of suffering, meaning a feeling of separation between what you have and what you desire, meaning some sort of a gap. And that gap implies some sort of tension between the ideas of what I am and what I would like to be. And in that tension, there's a hunger, a feeling of desire, a feeling of I would like to be, or I would like to have what I desire, feeling of separation from that thing, and a feeling of wanting to get closer, wanting to come together with that thing that we are hungry for. And as it turns out, the whole study of metaphysics, which really focuses not so much on what is in reality, but rather what the nature of reality itself is. The whole study of metaphysics really focuses on this idea of what is the nature of desire and how is my reality created through my experience of desire. Now, here in Sunday Mystery School, we have been really centering our focus on Neville Goddard's original Masterclass, and Neville Goddard, obviously being a famous mystic, teaching an approach to an understanding of what the nature of reality is that really centers on this idea of how to satisfy desire. Because if life really is an experience of the appeasement of hunger, then really learning how to satisfy or satiate our hungers, or how to grant, or in Neville's famous word, appropriate our desires so that we may experience what we desire to experience and thus live a life of satisfaction rather than that of suffering. That's really what the study of metaphysics boils down to. And this is also why, although you could describe what we do here as being spiritual in nature, it's also very practical, because that which is most spiritual is also most practical. That's something that Neville famously said. The most spiritual thing is also the most practical thing, because really the point of any spiritual practice is to enhance quality of life. And I can't think of a better way to enhance quality of life than to really build a comprehension and understanding of what reality is, what the nature of reality is, to the point where we can then use that understanding, use that comprehension to satiate desire. We're continuing today with Neville's original Masterclass, and we're at the portion of the Masterclass where he is taking questions from his students who have sat through these 5 lessons and really gained a profound understanding of what reality is. And not just from, one man's perspective, Neville's perspective, but really drawing on the ancient teachers whose words were inspired. It's known as the Word of God. They were inspired by consciousness itself and then written down and preserved in a way where thousands of years later, we're still talking about them. I think that's remarkable. These words, these inspired words were written down by our ancestors, these ancient metaphysicians, these ancient mystics, and preserved for thousands of years to the point where we are now talking about them in the modern era. We're still talking about them today. And this particular approach to asking the question of what is reality, we learn very quickly that this is not a new question. This is actually one of the oldest questions that any sentient being has ever asked. And in particular, here on Earth, we've been asking this question, what is the nature of reality itself, for a very, very long time. Now, I want to make a distinction here. Humanity, since ancient times, has been asking the question, what is the nature of reality itself? And this question is distinct and separate from questions about what is in reality. So I can ask questions about, what is the sun? What is the nature of the sun? What is earth? What is the nature of the earth? What is the human body? What is the nature of the human body? What are animals? What is the nature or relationship between all of those things? The sun, the earth, the human body, animals. What is weather? What is, all of the things that we can go into our sciences and take a look at? What is the nature of the atom? What is the nature of electrical charge or of electrons? All of those questions are asking about what is in reality. Okay, so all of these things, all these questions are asked about things that have already manifested. Okay, we're already experiencing them inside of a reality. Okay, but the metaphysician, the mystic, asks the one step bigger question. What is the nature of reality itself? This reality inside of which I am experiencing a sun, an earth, a human body, animals, electrons, atoms, and all of these things that scientists study inside of the envelope that is a reality. So as conscious beings, we are conscious of something. Okay, that's part of our nature. We're conscious of something, and that something that we are conscious of, we can describe as a reality. And so when consciousness begins to ask questions about the very nature of consciousness, not just what we are conscious of, but the very nature of what is this thing that we are experiencing that is creating a reality for us to be aware of? Okay, what is the nature of consciousness itself? This is now that penetrating eye of consciousness turned back and looking at itself. Okay, there's a lot of terms for this, but as an example, there's this idea of metacognition, which is really this, the thinking that we do about our thinking, okay? Or metaphysics, the very nature of reality itself, the one step bigger. So physics would be a study of what is taking place inside of reality, and metaphysics would be a study of what actually even is reality. Now, the reason why we ask such questions, again, tying it back to that which is most inherently spiritual is also most practical. The reason we ask such questions is because we suspect, each one of us who dares to ask such a question in our awareness, each one of us suspects that there is a perspective, there is wisdom, there is an insight to be gained from asking such questions that can change and shift and upgrade and enhance the quality of the reality that we are experiencing while we are here in the physical human form. And as it turns out, because these are eternal questions, it turns out that consciousness is always asking questions about the nature of reality itself, whether what is being experienced in that reality is an earth plane or an energetic plane or an astral plane or a life between lives plane. There's all of these different realms that we can be aware of experiencing in a reality. And there's always questions that will be about what is happening inside of reality. And also, there are always questions that consciousness is asking of itself. What is the very nature of reality? What is it about reality that is causing me to have an experience at all, much less whatever is within that experience? Okay, so we ask these questions because we suspect, we know, we sense, we feel that there are upgrades available to us. And as it turns out, the ancestors, these ancient metaphysicians and mystics who have taught us, who have passed down their teachings over countless generations to make sure that all generations equally have access to this wisdom, they agree with this. They agree with the premise that asking questions about the very nature of reality itself yields insights, which leads to upgrades, which leads to enhancements about our experience of life. The ancient teachers, these ancestors of ours, they took the idea of the one who asks questions about the nature of reality itself and begins to awaken from the sleep of reality and begins to awaken and really enter a state of love, which really is source itself, and begin to view reality through the lens of understanding that, reality is really an experience of one's own self, one's own nature, and then to awaken in love, to then be able to experience love as an experience of oneself. That individual is described as being a specific state, and that state is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the man who awakes, the human who awakes to the level of asking these questions and awakes also in love, meaning becoming aware that reality is not outside of one's own self and rising to a level of such complete harmonious acceptance of reality, of the within, of the without, of that relationship between what is within being projected into the screen of what is without, and raising all of that to the level of love. And the ancient teachers referred to the state of the one who does this as being in the state of Jesus Christ. And of course, we know from their teachings that that state of Jesus Christ, I have come so that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. The state is described as being associated with the state of eternal life. So there really is a treasure for those who begin to ask these questions. And so here we are going over a question and answer session with these students who have been asking these questions with Neville as their guide. Okay, they've sat through these 5 lessons, and now they're really bringing forth these very well-considered questions about the metaphysical and mystic teachings that they have experienced so far sitting in the audience with Neville. Okay, so that's the introduction. We're gonna pick up in the Q&A where we left off last week, and we've been doing several weeks here in the Q&A because it's so rich. So if you're just now catching in, tuning into Sunday Mystery School, you're definitely going to want to go back and check out all of our question and answer sessions because they really are so rich. So just to kind of tie us back into where we were last week, there's some really rich questions here. One of the questions was, I've been taught only to ask for spiritual growth, but really it's earthly things that I need. And Neville was saying, your dimensionally larger self is telling you what is available to you by making you aware of a desire for it. Your dimensionally greater self is showing you the direction of your potential by giving you desires, experience of desires. So you're not really going to move in the direction of something unless you want that thing. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of being human. We move towards what we want. And so really, as Neville is saying here, your dimensionally larger self speaks to you through the language of desire. Don't pretend that you don't want what you want. Don't deceive yourself. Know what you want. Claim that you have it. It is your Father's good pleasure to give it to you. And remember, whatever it is that you desire, that's what you have in a dimensionally larger sense. Okay. And then the next question was, do you have to keep in mind this idea of, my greater self is giving this to me? And he says, no, really, just accepting the end takes care of it. Just accept the end. Assume the feeling that your wish is fulfilled and allow the dimensionally greater self to determine the means. And then we closed the last question and answer session with Neville really emphasizing the importance of patience. Walk as though it were, and although time beats slowly in this dimension of your being, it will nevertheless bring you confirmation of your assumption. I ask you not to be impatient, though. If there is really one thing you have need of, it is patience. Okay, so that brings us up to where we left off last week. Let's move into the next question. Question number 9. Before we do that, before we say question number 9, I want to remind you all that we are going to be doing our own Sunday Mystery School question and answer session with members of the audience. And the form for that, the form to submit your questions, is now live. And you can access it. It's on the live stream on YouTube. It's in the chat. There's a link to that form. It's also in the video description on YouTube. There's a link to the form. It's also in the community tab. And if you're in the Zoom room, I posted it in the Zoom room. So we've put it all over the place for you to find that form, for you to submit your questions. Now, there's a space for 3 questions. If you would like to submit more than 3 questions, feel free to do so. Just submit the form again. Continue to submit the form until all of your questions have been accounted for, and we will do a special Q&A live stream for our questions once we complete the Neville Q&A session. Okay, so moving on to question number 9. The question is, isn't there a law, a universal law, that says you cannot get something for nothing? Must we not earn what we desire? What an amazing question. Isn't there a law of physics, some would say, that says you cannot get something for nothing? Don't we have to earn what we desire? Now, this is such a fascinating question because this really speaks to the heart of modern conditioning about what it means to be human. We're taught that we have to work for what we want. And while there is arguably wisdom in that, meaning that, there is perhaps benefit in moving towards what you desire, or, being willing to, do the gardening, to help things grow within reality itself. From the perspective of asking questions about the nature of reality itself, that's a different answer. Okay? So Neville says, in response to this question, he says, creation is finished. Creation is finished, meaning we're not creating anything. We don't have to create anything, because from the perspective of asking questions about the nature of reality itself, which, by the way, is a dimensional upgrade. Okay, so when we're asking questions about what is in reality, we're thinking from the level of the 3D, right? It's what we can sense with our sensory organs. It's what we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. That's questions that are 3D questions, okay, inside of what we perceive to be reality. Okay? The moment that we start to ask questions about the nature of reality itself, like what even is this reality? Now we're asking questions about things that can't be perceived with our 5 senses. We've now left the sensory realm of the 3D, and we've now gone up more expansively to a higher dimension, 4th and 5th dimension specifically. Okay, so from the perspective of the 4th and 5th dimension, we're going to focus mostly on the 4th dimension for this question. Creation is finished. Now, Neville says it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction than it's the same direction. I'm going to take it a little different, more scenic route than what Neville is going here. So Neville is saying creation is finished. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. That's pretty matter of fact. That's pretty straightforward. I'm going to describe it from this perspective of timelines. Okay, so when you transcend the 3D and you start to understand that you can perceive realities from outside of time, Okay, so 3D moves, very slowly, and it moves frame by frame. And there's a frame rate through which, the universe is refreshing itself as we're moving through the 3D. Okay, but when you expand your awareness to a higher dimensional perspective outside of time, you're now kind of on the outside looking in. And from the outside, you can look down and you can see that there's a timeline that you are walking. And because you're outside of time, you can see the beginning of that timeline. You can see the so-called end of the timeline. It's not really a line, it's actually a circle. But you can see all of the events that take place on that time stream, we'll call it, the time stream. And you can see how they all connect together. So it's like, you meet this person, they introduce you to this person. Next thing you know, you get this job offer, and then, you go here and you travel there and you meet these other people. And, it's like you can see all of that from outside of time. You're on a time stream, right? It's in a circle, it's a spiral, and you're working your way through it. Now, once you pop outside of time, you also become aware that there are other time streams to choose from. Okay. So it's not that you're creating anything new, it's that you're selecting from a menu of time streams that already exist, that have already been completely planned out from the level of outside of time. It's like, I'm going to use a couple of analogies here to really help this land and ground. Okay. So it's like a script to a movie. Okay. So there's one way to write a script to a movie, scene by scene, line by line, the characters, acting out the scenes, right? The beginning part of the movie, you have the end part of the movie. And you could also write a completely different script that maybe has a similar beginning and a similar ending, but the way that the story is woven to get from the beginning to the end could be completely different. Okay. And those two scripts could sit side by side together in a bookshelf. Okay. And when you're actually inside the movie and you're watching the movie from inside the movie, you're watching each scene unfold moment by moment by moment. But when you're standing in your office and you're looking at your bookshelf and you're seeing the two scripts side by side, those are two different timelines that you can choose to experience. They're already written, they're already finished, they're already complete, right? Creation is finished. You're just selecting the timeline that you will live, okay? That contains all of the scenes, all of the characters, all of the scripts, all of the words that are going to be said, all of the events that are going to be happen, the whole story, right? Already written, already complete, already finished, already in your bookshelf from outside of time. Your dimensionally greater self sitting in the study, and here's the bookshelf, all of the possible timelines that you could potentially choose to experience in this lifetime, okay? It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, meaning that they're all there, and it is your great pleasure to give to yourself the character that's inside the drama, any of the time streams that are desired, okay? Now, the Bible, the ancient teachers, they didn't talk about time streams and bookshelves full of movie scripts, because that was not their time, was not their jam. Okay, they were living in a different era. Okay, so we're living in the liquid modernity. Okay, we have those things to refer to as analogies. They didn't. So they gave parables. And in particular, the parable that Neville refers to is the parable of the prodigal son. This is what he says. He says, the parable of the prodigal son is your answer. In spite of man's waste, when he comes to his senses and remembers who he is, begins to ask those questions, what even is this reality that I'm in? Okay. And then once you ask that question, you start to awaken and start to remember. That is when the prodigal son feeds on the fatted calf of abundance and wears the robe and the ring of authority. Authority, author, right? You're the author. When you begin to ask the question about what even is this reality, that is the first step to the character beginning to reconnect and re-embody the state of being the author. Okay, so this is where you start to pop out of the 3D into higher dimensional awareness. And then you become aware of your bookshelf full of possible time streams that you could experience. Okay, so now you're the author. All of the time streams are already complete and written. Which one are you going to select from? You have a menu, right? What do you want? What do you desire? What are you hungry for? Okay, so this is how all these ideas start to align. Neville says, there's nothing to earn. In the 3D, it may seem like there is something to be done to earn on the outside, okay? But from a higher dimensional perspective, creation was finished. Neville says creation was finished in the foundation of time. So remember, outside of time, which would be considered the foundation of time. Fourth dimension would be considered the foundation of the third dimension, because the foundation is outside of time and gives birth to the experience of time, okay? You, as a human, are God made visible for the purpose of displaying what is, not what is to be. Meaning you're not here to strive. You are here to make visible what is. Do not think that you must work out your salvation by the sweat of your brow. It is not 4 months until the harvest. The fields are already white. Simply thrust in the sickle and reap. Okay. Do not think you must work out your salvation. Okay, so this comes back to this idea of all of life is but the appeasement of hunger. Okay, so you're hungry for something. You have a desire, okay? If you are thirsty, water is what would save you from thirst, okay? So water would be your savior if you are thirsty. If you are lacking money, okay, a paycheck or some sort of funds, okay, money would be the savior of your lack of money. It would save you from a lack of money. Okay, so this whole idea of salvation, whatever you are hungry for, the appeasement of that hunger is the salvation from the hunger. Okay, so Neville's saying you don't have to work that out by the sweat of your brow, meaning in the 3D. You don't have to work that out. You don't have to try to solve that problem using efforting, using muscles, using the grind, using, your physical strength. Rather, it's already done. Because when you begin to ask these questions from outside of time, and you see the whole of time laid out in front of you, okay? From outside, you're looking at the whole time stream. You see that it's already done. And all you have to do is accept the end. And that's why he's saying it's not 4 months until the harvest. I mean, you don't have to wait. You can reap right now when you know who you are, okay? When you know who you are, you can reap right now. Now, how do you do that? By accepting the satiation, okay? So it all starts in imagination. So you see something and you're like, I'm hungry for that, okay? So now you go through what Neville calls an appropriation, right? You give it to yourself on the inside, because on the outside, all that is a reflection of what you have on the inside, okay? So if you are seeing something on the outside that you feel that you don't have, it's because you feel on the inside that you don't have it. So you appropriate it, meaning you make it available to yourself and you assume that you have it in your consciousness. You become the person who has that thing, or the person who is satisfied from that hunger, okay? Saved from that desire, satisfied that hunger. You become the person who has that thing, who is that ideal on the inside. So you do this by adding it to your consciousness. You become aware of being the person who has that thing, or of being the person who has satiated that hunger. That is how you harvest. That is how you reap. And you don't have to wait for that. That's why he's saying it's not 4 months to the harvest. In consciousness, you're outside of time. Okay, in the 3D, we're going frame by frame by frame in this movie that is the 3D. Okay, but outside of time, there is no gap, there is no delay, there is no time. Okay, so you can assume it immediately, and you can become it on the inside immediately. Now remember, Neville does say the one thing you must have is patience, meaning that when you appropriate it on the inside and you become that thing, you're no longer desiring of it. That's the key, right? If your desire really is satiated because you've given it to yourself, you don't want it anymore. But because it has become a part of your self-concept, now it is now included in your world. And so you simply wait for it to appear, okay? Waiting for it to appear after you have appropriated it is very different from trying to work to make it appear while on the inside you are assuming it is not yours. Okay? I'm working to make something that I don't believe is mine through the sweat of my brow. That's a very energy intensive way to not get very far. Okay, so if you have a lot of excess energy that you want to burn up, you can do that. But for those of us who are focused on efficiency, the higher dimensional way is to assume it, to appropriate it, to give it to oneself. Remember, it is our Father's great pleasure to give us the kingdom. Who is the Father? Our fourth dimensional awareness, our higher dimensional awareness, our source. It is our great pleasure to give to our character the kingdom. Remember, the prodigal son who casts off the inheritance, leaves, goes wayward into the world. And then, when he begins to awaken and remember who he is, immediately is welcomed back, feeds on the fatted calf of abundance, wears the robe, the ring of authorship, simply by awakening and choosing to become aware of what the nature of reality is, that each one of us is, in truth, creating our own reality. I mean, it is already created, right? But on the higher dimensional plane, we are now experiencing the reality that we have already created. Okay, so we are the character experiencing the story that we, in our role of being the author, have written for ourselves. Question 10. Does not this thought that creation is finished, doesn't that rob us of our initiative? Does it rob us of our initiative to believe that creation is finished? This is a fascinating question. Absolutely fascinating. I think I can relate to this idea so much. Well, wait a second. If creation's already finished, then I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just walking a predetermined path, right? So does that rob me of my initiative? Does that rob me of my free will? Do I have free will? Neville's answer, he says, if you observe an event before it occurs, then the occurring event must be predetermined from the point of view of the 3D. Okay, so if I can perceive an event before it happens in my 3D world, then from my 3D point of view, that event was pre-written. It was predetermined. It was predestined. But Neville says, while you can do this, you also do not have to encounter what you observe before it happens in your 3D. You can, by changing your concept of yourself, interfere with your future and mold it in harmony with your changed concept of self. Okay, so going back to the study with the bookshelf, and here's all of the realities that you could experience in this present human form. Okay, you take one book off of the bookshelf, and it's the script, it's the screenplay, it's the whole of life in a book, written out moment by moment. And that particular volume is directly linked to your current conception of yourself. If you stay in the state of being that you are currently in, this is the story that you will live. Okay? Here's where your free will comes into place. You can actually choose to put that book back on the bookshelf and select a different volume that is representative of a different state of being. You can actually choose to become that being who awakens in love to the state of the authorship. And you can pull that script, that screenplay off the shelf and say, what would my life be like moment by moment, scene by scene, line by line, if this was my self-concept? Okay? From the point of view of being the character, you just changed time streams, meaning that whatever was ahead of you on the time stream while you were in the old self-concept has now been upgraded. And now what is ahead of you in the new time stream is a direct reflection of your new concept of yourself. This is what Neville means when he says you can change your concept of yourself, interfere with your future, and mold it in harmony with your new, changed concept of self. Again, can be kind of abstract to think of it this way. So how do we make this very practical? How do we do this? How do we do this? We do this by changing our concept of ourself. And how do we change our concept of ourself? We give ourselves new memories. We give ourselves new memories. So your old concept of yourself experienced certain sensory impressions in life. Okay, so that you could really describe your life as a collection of sensory impressions. So it's like you're living in the 3D. You remember back whatever your earliest memory was, and whatever that earliest memory was, chances are there's sensory aspects of it. I mean, there's something, your earliest memory in this form is probably something that you saw or smelled or tasted or touched or heard. Your life is a collection of sensory impressions. And that collection of sensory impressions has lived with you up until this moment. And that collection of sensory impressions also translates to your state of being. If you desire to change your state of being, you now need to give yourself new memories. And you do that using imagination. You do that using the techniques that we teach here, Sunday Mystery School, that have been taught since ancient times, of state akin to sleep, which is a specific experience where you dim your senses. In the 3D, you're still a human being, but you're going to dim your senses of what it feels like right now to be a human being, meaning you're going to close your eyes. You're going to kind of go someplace quiet. The Bible talks about, going into your closet, right? So you're kind of shutting out the outside world, getting very comfortable, kind of getting into a very slow, relaxed brainwave state. We can talk about it scientifically now because we're in the modern era. Neville didn't have any scientific terms for it, but now we've proven scientifically what this is. It's a scientific portal, basically, to the subconscious through brainwave state. So you can actually learn to create this brainwave state, an experience of this brainwave state. And then in this very slow, sleepy state of consciousness where you still have control of your attention, you create a scene by arranging sensory impressions that implies that you are now your new self-concept. Whatever sensory impressions you arrange for yourself to experience in this state akin to sleep, the implication is that you are now this new person. And so by doing this, you are creating a memory that you are installing into your awareness, because now in this sleepy state of being, this state akin to sleep, you are experiencing an event that is now going to become a part of your memories. Your old self-concept didn't have this memory. Your old self-concept didn't experience this event. You couldn't still be your old self and have this new memory, because this new memory only happens when you are your new concept of yourself. This is you being the author. So you write a scene that would imply you are now your upgraded new state of being. You are now your new upgraded self-concept. You write that scene, and then you go into imagination in a sleepy state of consciousness, and you experience the sensory impressions of that event so that they become memory. So that when you wake up and you come out of that state akin to sleep, you now know that you are a different person than the person who went to sleep, who went into that state akin to sleep. You woke up a different person. And how do you know that? Because now you have a new memory. You have a new memory. You have meaningfully changed your self-concept by giving yourself a new memory. Now, this is what we mean by appropriating, meaning you're not waiting for the external world to bring you an event that will create a memory, okay? That's waiting 4 months for the harvest. Rather, You are saying the fields are white right now. The fruit is ripe and ready for me to pluck. Let me satiate my desire right now by creating a memory for myself using my own human superpower, which is my imagination. Let me create that experience for myself. Let me give myself that experience, and let me wake up from that state in a new self-concept, knowing that I am now a new person, possessing a new memory that did not previously exist in my old self-concept. And by doing that, I have chosen a new time stream, because now I am the person who experienced this new event that I appropriated for myself. Okay? Now my whole existence has been shifted into a new time stream. Now I'm the person who had that experience, the one that I created for myself. I am now the one who experienced that. And this is what shifts you into the desired time stream. Question 11. Does this ability to change the future, does that deny that creation is finished? If I can change the future, then how could creation be finished? This is what Neville says. He says, no, you, by changing your concept of self, change your relationship to things. Your concept of yourself, I mean, really everything in your life is a relationship. You have a relationship. You, the observer, right? The I am, that part of that is you, part of you that is the I am, has a relationship to your humanness, to your body, to your senses, to other people, to wherever you live, to however you get around in the world, to concepts such as money, to ideas such as really anything, current events, career, occupation, art, science, music. All of those things are relationships between the part of you that is I am and the part of you that is experiencing those things. Those are relationships. Okay, so as your self-concept changes, your relationship changes to everything. Okay, you're literally moving in a point of perspective, right? You're shifting your perspective by changing your self-concept. So you're now viewing it from a different angle because your concept has changed. You have changed. And so therefore, your relationship to everything on the outside has changed. And so the example that Neville gives of this, he says, if you rearrange the words of a play to write a new one, a different play, you have not created new words. You have simply had the joy of rearranging them. Your concept of yourself determines the order of events that you encounter or experience. All events are in the foundation of the world, but their order of arrangement you can choose through your self-concept. Okay, so creation is still finished. All things that could possibly exist already exist. The dictionary, the English language, all human languages, all of those words already exist. And you can arrange them in any order to create the experience of your self-concept, which then becomes the experience of your life. Okay, so this is how those two ideas can coexist. Yes, creation is finished. And yes, you can change the future, your experience of the future, by changing your self-concept. Okay. Question 12. Why should one who works hard in metaphysics always seem to lack? It's an interesting question. Why should one who works hard in metaphysics always seem to lack? Well, there really is only one answer to this, and Neville's got it. He says, because this person has really not applied metaphysics. Maybe they've been hearers, but not doers. If you've really applied metaphysics, you are not living an experience of lack. If you have really applied the power that you are not hungry for things. You're not experiencing lack You're experiencing satiation. You're experiencing plenty. Neville says, I am not speaking of a mamby-pamby approach to life. I am speaking of a daily application of the law of consciousness. This isn't some woo-woo, frilly, metaphysical approach to things. This is a daily application of the law that creates realities, the law of consciousness. When you appropriate your good, there is no need for a man or state to act as a medium through which your good will come. Living in a world of men, money is needed in my everyday life. If I invite you to lunch tomorrow, I must pick up the check. When I leave the hotel, I must pay the bill. In order to take the train back to New York, my railway fare must be paid. I need money, and it has to be there. I am not going to say, God knows best. God knows I need money. Rather, I will appropriate the money as though it were. I will appropriate the money as though it were. We must live boldly. We must go through life as though we possessed what we want to possess. Do not think that because you helped someone else, that someone outside of you saw your good works and will give you something to ease your burden. There is no one to do it for you. You yourself must go boldly on, appropriating what your Father has already given you. This is a powerful question. Powerful question, an amazing answer. So this idea of a mamby-pamby approach to life. Okay, so this is not some, oh, there's something greater than me that's just going to handle all of my problems. No, this is brazen impudence. This is living boldly using the law of consciousness. This is saying, I'm not waiting for, something outside of me to give me what I need. I am assuming, using the law of consciousness, that I have what I need. I am giving it to myself. I am boldly appropriating it, making it available for myself, claiming it, assuming it. There's a boldness to that. It's not some frilly, oh, I'm waiting for something outside of me. No, I am the thing outside of me. I am everything. I am that I am. There is nothing outside of me when I'm in the state of understanding who I really am. When I am the one who is asking the questions about the nature of reality itself, and I'm in that state, I know there is no one outside of me to give it to me. I am giving it to myself. I am the author. What am I choosing to write? That's what I'm going to experience. You must go boldly on appropriating what your higher multidimensional self has already given to you. Question 13. Can an uneducated person educate themselves by assuming the feeling of being educated? So this is a fascinating question. So earlier this week, I had a special guest on our casual podcast called Neville and Chill. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, I highly recommend you do so. It's Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. All the recordings are also on a playlist on my YouTube channel. And a special guest, Angela Haley. And she was talking about mostly her experience of manifesting her soulmate using the law of consciousness. She learned to appropriate the state of being married to her soulmate. And it really is a phenomenal story. It's so rich. In the story, as she was telling it, which was mostly focused on appropriating her soulmate, she was giving stories about how she really manifested an entire life for herself, right? As we all do, but just very consciously. And one of the things she was talking about was manifesting these prestigious jobs at law firms all over the world. She would just get this idea in her head, oh, I want to work for, this law firm in Australia. And so she would just imagine it until it became very, very real in her awareness. And then next thing you know, here comes the job offer and she's hired. She had to pass the bar exam to work for a Wall Street law firm at some point in her career. And she had failed the exam a couple of times. And so she was going to take it one more time. And she really, really focused on what would the feeling be like if I passed this bar exam. And naturally, she did pass the bar exam because she really got aligned with that state. And she was able to get a job offer that was typically reserved only for graduates of Ivy League programs, Ivy League law schools. She was able to get access to that simply because she adjusted her self-concept to where she was a match for that. So with a question like this, well, can an uneducated person educate themselves by assuming the feeling of being educated? She was really talking about how you don't really need credentials. Like you can manifest all the credentials that you need. It's not like you have to work for them from the sweat of your brow to achieve the state. I know that's a little abstract. There's like, but wait a second, don't I have to have this license, that license? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean it's hard to get those things, right? Like, you have to not get in your own way and create unnecessary resistance, which I feel sometimes some people do that. They create unnecessary resistance. So this idea of being an uneducated person and assuming the feeling of being educated, that's moving into the state of I am an educated person. My old self-concept was I'm not very educated, and maybe I feel a little locked out of certain regions of high society because I'm not very educated. And then now changing that script, changing that story and saying, actually, I'm assuming the feeling of being educated. And Neville says, of course. An aroused interest is awarded information on every side. I'm reminded of Shweta, who has also been a significant contributor to our work at the School of Imagination. She was talking about really having this piqued interest in metaphysics and particularly how science, emerging science, quantum physics and similar fields that are studying what consciousness is. She had this aroused interest into what the relationship was between Neville's teachings and some of this leading cutting edge science so that she could really kind of build that bridge between the world of academic science and metaphysics. And so she had this aroused interest, and she has shared the story several times about how simply piquing that interest led her to pick up the right book at exactly the right time. And it falls open and there's the answer to her question. And then, she's, just perfect match for all of the information that she needed. And when a new question would arise, she would simply assume that question was answered and it would show up in her awareness very shortly thereafter. So yes, an aroused interest is awarded information from every side. You must sincerely desire to be well-schooled. The desire to be well-read, followed by the assumption that you are, makes you selective in your reading. The right books will show up. Right information will arrive. I can't tell you how many times I've been thinking about something. I do a lot of business development type work. I've been thinking about an idea, developing a certain aspect of a business. And then next thing you know, I just happen to be led to exactly the right information that I need at exactly the right time, which opens up a whole new world of exploration in whatever idea I had been contemplating. And I know that each one of you hearing my voice in this moment can relate to that. That's a real phenomenon, and it is a phenomenon of consciousness. And it's because the world that we are experiencing is not without. Although it appears to be outside of us, it is not without us. It is inside of us. It is within. Everything on the outside is a shadow of that which is within. So when we move into the state of already having the answer, naturally our outside world will show us the answer that we already have and a way that we can interact with in the 3D. As you progress in your education, Neville says, you automatically become more selective and more discriminating in all that you do, which is, of course, the state of being an educated, well-read person. Selective and discriminating. It's a state. It is nothing more than a state of being. Okay. Next question. This is a question by a husband and a wife who are in Neville's class together. So this is a great question to illustrate the relationship to metaphysical ideas as explored in a partnership. So if you have a relationship with another and you are studying these ideas together, this question comes from that state. Okay. So the question is, my husband and I are taking the class together. Should we discuss our desires with each other? Here's what Neville has to say. He says, there are two spiritual sayings that permeate the Bible. One spiritual saying is, go and tell no man. Go and tell no one. And the other, that's the first saying. The second saying is, I have told you before it comes to pass that when it does come to pass, you may believe. This is what Neville says. He says, it takes spiritual boldness to tell another that your desire is fulfilled before it is seen on the outside. If you do not have that kind of boldness, then you had better keep quiet. I personally, Neville says, I enjoy telling my plans to my wife because we both get such a thrill when they come into being. The first person anyone wants to prove this law to is, of course, their partner. It is said that Muhammad is everlastingly great because his first disciple was his wife. Okay, interesting answer to that question. So if I'm studying these ideas with a partner, should I tell my partner about my fulfilled desire before it can be seen on the outside? Depends on how bold you are. If you are steadfast in confidence, if you know that you know that you know that you know that you know, then it doesn't matter who you tell. It's fine. If you know that you know that you know and you've boldly appropriated, you can tell anyone. It's fine. If you are in the state of, I have assumed this, but it's also not for public consumption, then just keep it to yourself. The silence in the darkness knew, right? The silence in the darkness knew. Keep it safe and sacred within your own being. There's nothing wrong with that either. It's really up to you. You can go either way. Do what feels right for you. Next question is clearly from the same person in the audience who is there with her partner. And the question is, should my husband and I work on the same project or on separate ones? Neville says, that's entirely up to you. My wife and I have different interests, yet we have a lot in common. Do you recall the story I told of our return to the United States this spring? I felt it was my duty as a husband to get passage back to America, so I appropriated that to myself. For those of you that may not get this reference, really quick, Neville and his wife sailed to Barbados in 1947, I believe, and visited family for several months and did not have tickets to come back to America. And when they were like, okay, we've sufficiently sunned ourselves. I've been to Barbados. It's a beautiful, lovely little island. Lots of sun, sand, beach. It's blissful. And also, there's probably a time where you're like, okay, I've sufficiently sunned myself, time to go home. That's when Neville was like, okay, I'm going to go get my ticket, for my family to go back to America. And he goes down to the office and they're like, sorry, we're sold out for like the next 8 or 9 months. Like, you're not going to get back until probably September. And he's like, well, that's not going to work for me. I have to be back in May. I got to teach the 1948 lessons. I got a masterclass to teach. This has to be preserved for posterity so that 70 years later, Josiah Brandt and the Sunday Mystery School audience can be discussing these ideas. I've got to get back to America. So what does he do? He doesn't beg. He doesn't plead. He goes back to his hotel room and he lays back in the easy chair and he goes into his imagination and he creates the scene that would imply the satiation of the desire to go back to America by a specific date. He climbs the gangplank to the ship, with his wife and his daughter. In his imagination, in a sleepy state of awareness, he climbs that gangplank over and over again, climbing up to the ship. The passage is already secured. You wouldn't be climbing up the gangplank if the passage wasn't already secured. If you didn't have a ticket, you would not be boarding the ship, right? So he created this scene with sensory evidence that he already had the ticket, okay? So he jumped over the event of getting the ticket in the time stream. He hopped over that rock because he didn't know how it was going to happen. So he just jumped right over it and created in his imagination the scene that would imply that the problem was solved. And naturally, it was solved. You got a call a few days later. Mr. Goddard, we've had a cancellation. There's a cabin for you. There was 250 people on the wait list, but we called you first. Okay. Unsurprised, because Neville knows the law works, right? So he just accepts the passage and he's back on his way so that he could teach these profound lessons so that we could be talking about it 70 years later. Okay. There you go. He's saying, I felt it was my duty to secure that passage as a husband. So I did it. And there's also certain things that he says are on my wife's side of the contract, such as maintaining our clean and lovely home and also finding the appropriate school for our daughter. So she handles those imaginal pictures. She handles those acts. Neville says, quite often my wife will ask me to imagine for her, as though she has greater faith in my ability to do it than in her own. And that does flatter me, Neville says, because every man worthy of the name wants to feel that his family has faith in him. But I see nothing wrong in the communion between two who love one another. So rich. Okay, we're going to do one more question. Question 16. I would think that if you get too much into the sleepy state, there would be a lack of feeling. And this is what Neville says to that question. When I speak of feeling, I am not speaking of emotion. When I speak of feeling, I am not speaking of emotion. I am speaking of acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled. That's the feeling that you're connecting to. The feeling of acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled. That's the feeling. Feeling grateful, feeling fulfilled, feeling thankful. It is easy to say, thank you. Isn't it wonderful? It is finished. These are feelings that are the acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled. When you get into the state of thankfulness, you will either wake up knowing it is done, or you will fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You can do either. You're just feeling yourself into that state of thankfulness, feeling yourself into that feeling that it is done. You're feeling that yourself into that feeling that it is already a fact. You're feeling yourself into alignment with the self-concept of the one who already has it, the one who already secured the passage and is now climbing the gangplank from the tender to the ship. That's the feeling that you're catching. It's not an emotion. It's a feeling of acceptance of the end. Okay. All right, so we made it to question 16. We still have quite a ways to go. We're going to pick this up, continue with it next Sunday at Sunday Mystery School. At this time, I invite anyone who is in the Zoom room who would like to share. Give me a moment to change the settings here so that you all can see. Mute and focus mode. There we go. Okay, Orlena, I can see you. Go ahead with your question or contribution.
Okay. Okay, so I have a question as
Yes.
usual. Okay, when is it appropriate to do revision to change a memory in your past, as opposed to changing choosing a vision that you just want to create?
Fantastic question. I love this. When
Right.
is it appropriate? I would say the first answer is when you feel a desire to do so.
Okay.
You wouldn't really have the desire to do it were it not appropriate to do it.
Okay.
So if it's awakening your interest, like, oh, there's this event. I wonder if I could revise that. I kind of want to. Then do it. Then
Right.
revise it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there's no right there. So it's up to you, basically.
I would say so, yes.
Okay. Um. Okay. So then, what's the difference?
Between revising
And
and
just like choosing to just create something in the future per se, you know?
yes. So they're very similar. There's a lot of similarities between them. One is you're changing sensory, you're changing your perception of sensory impressions of an event that's already occurred. And the other one is you're rearranging sensory impressions to imply that an event has already occurred, an event that you want has already occurred. So one is changing something that when you first experienced seemed to be less than your ideal.
Okay.
Now you're up leveling it, raising it to the level of love, aligning it with the ideal,
Okay.
and then changing your self concept, going like kind of projecting more in towards the future, is now creating a scene that would imply that something aligned with your ideal has already occurred.
Okay.
Kind of two different places in the time stream.
Right.
Both are equally valid, and the technique is very, very similar.
Okay. Thank you so
Of
much.
course. Thank you for that. Roxy, go ahead.
Yes, Josiah. I know we always talk about the chief definite aim, and that is our goal, is to make that as real as possible.
Yes.
But I'm thinking, is there another step before that possibly of instead of, because I know a lot of people say that it's so hard to figure one thing. Is there a place for your chief definite aim being one who believes, seeing yourself as one who believes, seeing yourself as one who has completed creation, has as being the being that is capable.
So kind
So if
of
you're
like
having a problem trying to isolate a thing,
yeah.
to go back to just seeing yourself as one who everything that I want comes into manifestation.
The state of the master manifester
Yes.
and having that be the chief definite aim. Yes.
Until I guess you could figure another, be more specific.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place to start. I think it's kind of that catch-all. Because obviously if you're in the state of master manifester, then you're really just riding bridges of incidents and just getting the best of everything, the first class life, right? So I do see a lot of value in that. The chief definite aim in a metaphysical, a little bit more abstract sense, yes, I think that works. The where chief definite aim comes from specifically that I'm aware of is from the work of Napoleon Hill. And he's talking about it in terms of really bringing all of your focus to bear on like a specific mission of sorts, like a specific focus. So basically what I'm saying is I think there's the opportunity to refine it further, but I think that the chief definite aim of expressing the state of being the master manifester, I think that's a great place to start. And then you can even add to that self-concept. I'm also very clear on what I want to focus on. If there's a focus that will emerge, I know what that is. You can add that into the self-concept also. Very good. Okay. Who's next? Jamie, I think I saw your hand up. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. It's not a question as much as I just want to highlight, because it's helping me assimilate that when we are in that imaginal act, it's a very simple act, like it is already done. We don't have to try to figure out the way you got there, but you're just landing in that space of it's done. And I want to be brazenly impudent, to use those words, to actually declare, and I will share my imaginal act, which is I have a New York Times bestselling book, and my imaginal act and I can feel it, it's so tangible, is I'm sitting at a book signing in a bookstore. There is a line in front of me, and I have a pen in my hand, and I've opened up the flap of my New York Times bestselling book, and I'm asking the person in front of me, who shall I make it out to? And then signing.
Yes.
So I know it may seem just, it is that simplistic. And sometimes that's what makes it hard to, because we're so used to trying to figure it out, the mind, right? But it's just like, you know, unzipping one meat suit, so to speak, and donning another one, that of the author that is celebrated and signing books. So that actually is a testament to how easy you've made it for me to stand in these shoes today with this level of, okay, I get it. The light bulb went off. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome, Jamie. Thank you for sharing that. It's fantastic. Congratulations on your book. So good.
You're all invited.
I was going to say, you can make it out to Josiah, actually. I would put it in my bookshelf.
Let's do it. You're all invited.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Jamie. Andrea? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Excuse me. So I was just trying to tie things together in my mind scripturally, as I tend to do. And I really liked what Roxy was saying about a chief definite aim. I was wondering, is that the same? Okay, Abraham Hicks talks about the dominant intent. And then I was thinking about the scripture in Matthew where it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things would be added to you. So I know you were talking about making it more specific, but is this what we're talking about here scripturally, where, you know, you keep your eyes single on God, everything else is added to that, you know? So if our chief aim is to be one with God, oneness, then and in alignment, then things will be magnetically, you know, be drawn to us.
Yes. I love that. I love tying it back to this idea of seek ye first the kingdom of God. I think that's what Roxy's pointing at. Yes. The state of being in that, being the appropriator of the kingdom as the chief definite aim. I love that. I think that ties together perfectly.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure it made sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it did to me.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Andrea. Shireen.
Oh, I didn't know how to raise a hand in here. So,
Oh, good. Yeah.
thank you. Quick question to kind of jump on what Olana was saying earlier, that sometimes you want to go into a memory. So say I have a memory, for example, I had an event, it was my daughter's sweet 16, and literally I did not know how I was going to pay for the caterer, but I assumed it would be paid. And I stood on it. And this was very early in my spiritual journey. The day prior to her party, literally, like I owed these people $600. I'm expecting like 100 people. There's no food. The day prior, I have a call from my cousin, long distance cousin. I barely speak to her. She's like, I just want to call to offer my help. Is there anything I can pay for? I was like, well, yeah, actually there is. So sometimes I wonder if I have an event, it's different circumstances, different players, but it follows along the same theme. Tapping into that memory that it worked out perfectly, even though, you know, it's not exactly lined up with what I'm thinking of right now, but just tapping into the essence of that memory. Is that also something, you know, helps with the creative process to stay focused? I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. I think yeah. So you're talking about assuming the end, right? You're talking about
Right.
creating a scene that would imply that it all did work out, even if you don't know exactly the configuration of it.
Right.
You're boldly assume that it's going to work out for you. Yeah. Yeah. You're on it. Yeah. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shireen. Got a Where's Waldo moment here. My cat just made an appearance. This is the first time my cat has ever made an appearance on Sunday Mystery School. Everybody, can you see her up there in the window? This is a moment. She's going to become internet famous here. She just came out of nowhere. Yeah, she loved this conversation. Okay. Anybody else from the Zoom room? Okay. So as a reminder, for those of you that are on the live stream or watching the recording, if you have questions, you can submit them. They're in a Google form. That link is in the video description. It's also posted on my community tab and elsewhere. You can submit multiple questions. You can submit multiple forms. And when we get to the end of Neville's Q&A, we will be going over the questions just from our SMS audience. And I'm really very much looking forward to that. So that's all for today's live stream. We will continue with the Q&A next week. And until then, imagine wisely, my friends, and we will see you all in the next. Have a great week, everybody.